PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Welcome to this special edition of Fireside Chat, where we have two distinguished gentlemen that are going to weigh in on what is happening in the United States elections 2020. We have Professor M.D. Nalapat and Sri T.V. Mohandas Pai. Nalapat ji, Mohandas Pai ji, namaskara and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaste.
Sir, we have a very interesting election play out as we see in front of our eyes. 9 states are still up for grabs. They have not announced it. 2 of them appear to be going for Biden, 7 for Trump, but it is still a little too early to say who is going to win all these things because every one of them is at 95% or less, which means that there is a possibility that the leads could go the other way. So having said all these things, I just want, before I invite you two for comment, I just want to give some updates on the Indian Americans who are running various races. Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, and Raja Krishnamurthy, all 3 Democrats appear to be winning. Ritesh Tandon, who was going up against Ro Khanna, he wasn't so lucky. And Nisha Sharma also is losing. And so is Manga Anantathula. Every one of them have done well because they've got about 25 to 28% of the vote. This is the first time they're all contesting, and therefore I wish them all the best in the next elections, which is just 2 years around the corner. And one more thing, there was one other candidate, which was Rishi Kumar. This is an unusual situation. In California, the 2 finalists are the ones who contest for a seat, and the 2 finalists can be from the same party. So Rishi Kumar was fighting against another Democrat, Anna Eshoo. Anna Eshoo has been around for 30 plus years. I've known her. Her niece was my daughter's classmate. So I've seen her come for basketball games. Long story short, good person, but Rishi also loses. But this is a start. I hope that Indian Americans stay involved in America's politics, because that is how you make your voice heard. And another important thing about California, they had a state resolution, Prop 16, which was going to mandate reservations into the UC system, and thankfully that is failing, which I'm very happy, because I thought California is a land of meritocracy. United States is a land of meritocracy. Having said all that, this is just the basis. I would now like to invite Sri Sridhar Chityala ji, who just joined us, to set the stage for what he sees in the US elections, what he's seeing as trends, and then perhaps I can start inviting one of you at a time. Sridhar ji, take it away.
Namaskar. Sorry, my apologies. I was running a few minutes late, but had to get a few things out of the way. Where we are at the moment is we are at an impasse. Both sides have very specific positions as to how they see this panning out. And you saw some pretty provocative or controversial statements on both sides. So I think by early afternoon, based on the latest assessment from the people who are responsible for announcing the results, they believe that we'll get a pretty good indication in terms of where this race is heading. In terms of Pennsylvania, which is one of the kind of contentious states, they've been changing rules, and they have been, counting votes, not counting, discarding, etc. I think there would be some kind of resolution to that, but they believe the counting may take at least another few days, and we may not get Pennsylvania before the end of the week or early next week. So we are set for a very interesting phase in the next few hours, but the race has turned out to be much, much closer than what it was predicted. All the pollsters have proven to be wrong, and the margins that they were speculating before has not turned out to be very true. So I just issued a press statement, which I'll share it, which is effectively to say that this is the official position. Democrats are trying to steal the election. The pollsters have been proven wrong. President Trump has come back very strongly. our campaigns have resonated, and we have seen that in the outcome, especially in Texas. We have seen it by way of outcome, Texas and Florida. And we also saw a wide swing of votes from the minority communities in Florida. We are leading in Georgia. We are leading in North Carolina. We believe we have a good shot, and we are leading with 75% votes in by about 10 percentage points in Pennsylvania. So we believe we have a very strong. I'm a member of the advisory board for Indian Voices for Trump. So in that context, I'm making the statement. This is the law of the land. But nothing is kind of is done until the fat lady has sung. So but we'll get some indications early this afternoon.
So thank you so much, Sridhar ji. Now, I just want to add a couple of things before I hand off control to Mohandas Pai Avare. One thing is that viewers, we are unable to stream today on Facebook. We are trying to figure that out, but we are streaming on Twitter and YouTube. We apologize for the inconvenience. A second thing is Trump won 2016 with 303 electoral college votes. Now, from that point, we are going to do the math and see where he is trailing, which of the states that he won then is losing now, so that if he ends up losing some of the states, will he still be about 270 or not? This is something that Sridhar ji will perhaps update us in the next time he gets a chance to speak. But Mohandas Pai Avare, this is something that is unusual in that the world's most advanced democracy technologically still has these all sorts of all over the place electoral counting methods. There is no election commission for the entire country. Every state has to declare its own results. In fact, there are some states where all the delegates don't go to the winner. So that there is Maine and there's one other state that has these things. So what do you see from looking from outside, how this is being played out? Because we may not have a new president till January.
Well, Sree, I think it's very surprising that the most powerful nation ever in the history of the world has a broken down electoral system. They're used to talks of American exceptionalism, telling the world how to run their internal affairs, talking about democracy in various countries. We have seen in this election deep divisions within the United States. We have seen the bad effects of racism, misogyny. We have seen widening poverty in the United States. We've seen debates about lack of health care for the bottom 10% of society. And on top of that, we are seeing extreme leftism. We are seeing riots in the streets and people fighting over whether the federal police or local police have to come. We've seen some political leaders praising these rioters and destroyers of property to say they have a right to do that because they've been ill-treated. We've seen disregard for law and order. Every kind of anarchy that is possible in the modern society is seen in the United States over the last 6 months. And on top of that, a broken electoral system where the people's decision is not able to be shown to the people themselves within a reasonable period of time. Each state has its own law. It's difficult to digest for all of us outside the United States who are not very familiar with the system, who have been used to seeing elections happen and presidents get elected, inaugurations happen, and every day we are told the story of American exceptionalism and how they're such a great society. They are a great society. There's no doubt about it. But I think there's a lot of fixing up, and we're all very curious. And I think it's time that America listen to the rest of the world about good practices, about benchmarks, how to run elections. And possibly India could be a case study how to run elections. We have more than 650 million people voting. And on counting day, within maybe 2.5, 3 hours, we get the results out. And it's fully electronic, and the systems work. In many parts of this country, you carry the electronic machines on the back of elephants. You go to a forest area where there are very, very small number of people because the law says within a certain number of kilometers, you need to have a voting station. It is done. You have camels carrying them in the deep desert. They all come. There are complaints. There are other things, but voting is done and results announced very well. And we don't have this big fights going to courts and everything. And I think it's a big lesson for all of us that every country needs to reform itself. Every country has to relook at itself to make sure that the future is much better.
Well, Mohandas Pai Avare, you might be pleased to know that many Americans who have seen these presidential elections go by have actually said that US has come a long way. I'm saying this because Honest Abe, who was considered a very honest politician, he's accused of stealing the nomination for the Republican Party nominee as way back in 1860. They said that he
Oh my
stole
God.
the nomination. They just went out. They used to have paper slips for saying who do you nominate. Then they accused that the manager for Abe Lincoln went out to the street. He just picked any random person, not delegates, and they said just come in and crowd this hall, and then say whenever Abe's name comes up, you all raise your hands, and that's how he got elected. Anyway, so that is just a context. Up until 1960, who was going to run as the president of United States was decided in dark rooms, smoky, dingy rooms. That's where they decided who shall be the president. That's what is the accusation. You have so many things. Tammany Hall was one of the famous names that used to control who ran the country. This was a place in New York City. I'm just rambling on here, but all I'm trying to say is television in 1960, when they had the debate, that changed a lot of things. It brought out the transparency in the selection system. And since then, the US has progressed, perhaps not fast enough, perhaps not enough, not electronically, it's not advanced enough. I don't know what else to say. Electoral college system has served its day. It doesn't have to be there. One can just take the total count and decide who's going to be the president, but that has not happened. We don't know when it will happen. But be that as it may, we have what we have. Professor Nalapat, how do you see this thing? I understand, I accept that there are lots of flaws in the selection system, the election system of United States, but even given all this stuff, how do you see, let's assume for the moment, because everything points to Trump regaining his presidency, that US is going to perhaps continue down this path with the same government. And in fact, I've heard Steve Mnuchin say that he would like to come back, and perhaps even Mike Pompeo, and we'll come to that a little bit later with Sridhar Chityalaji, who can give us his thought, assuming a continuation in presidency. How do you see this whole thing play out? Because a lot of us didn't even sleep last night.
Well, I'd like to say, Sree, that I'm part of the group that didn't sleep very much last night, and I would like to tell you that I watched a lot of Donald Trump's speeches, and believe me, I think Bollywood has got a real fight on its hands because they're fun, they're rollicking, and very importantly, Donald Trump has been playing on raw emotion. I think, Biden and the Democrats have been talking about logic, coronavirus, this many people, this, Anthony Fauci and others. And we all remember Dr. Fauci. He was a gentleman who tried to have a vaccine for AIDS. Poor man didn't succeed in that vaccine. Ultimately, as I think, Sridhar and Mohandas will bear me out, eventually George Bush rescued the situation for a large part of the world by going ahead with getting India to supply the vaccine, and not vaccine, the therapeutics. And now 90% of the therapeutics for AIDS comes from India. My own view has long been that even if you don't get a vaccine, you'll have therapeutics. And India can be the natural location for those therapeutics if both Sridhar's hero as well as the Democratic heroes, if they agree. But I simply want to make a simple point that, look, Donald Trump ran as an outsider, and even in his speeches, he says, look, I'm not a politician. I'm a complete outsider. He doesn't call himself even a Republican, frankly. But Joe Biden is a quintessential Democrat. The insiders chose the consummate insider to take on the consummate outsider. Now, frankly, going by the polls, etc., it would have been, almost all of us, myself included, were of the view it is a hopeless fight. What saved the situation? I thought Xi Jinping had done a master stroke by sending COVID to the whole world, and then and specifically to United States, and frankly, infecting Donald Trump. But the fact is, COVID has rescued Donald Trump. The man has got cured, and I think that's a big argument in favor of therapeutics, like for HIV/AIDS. Remember one thing, COVID can also respond to therapeutics produced cheaply in India. But after that, the man became as energetic as well as an adolescent. He's been bounding around the place. So I think that has certainly impressed a lot of people. From being the perpetrator of many deaths in America, 2 lakh deaths, whatever, almost, allowing 100,000 more people to die, from being the perpetrator, which is what the Democrats pictured him, he became the victim. And they didn't get the message. They didn't get the fact that after he got COVID and fought COVID, and his wife got COVID, and if I'm not mistaken, his son got COVID, he is the victim. And you can't be victim and perpetrator at the same time. So they didn't change their message. So all I'd like to say, Sree, I still believe that if you count every vote, and we don't know if two things are going to happen. One, the Republican Party today is as focused on winning elections as the Democratic Party was in the in the 1920s and 1930s. We have heard of Tammany Hall, for example, in New York. Any way of ensuring that voting goes in the Republican direction, ensuring it does not go in the Democrat direction, they are going ahead with it with a ruthlessness. And the other hand, you're Joe Biden. I don't care if you have not voted for me or you have voted for me. For heaven's sake, then why should you vote for Joe Biden? If you don't vote for Donald Trump, something is going to happen to you. He's like Lee Kuan Yew. I think Mohandas will know that those constituencies that didn't work, that didn't vote for Lee Kuan Yew's party, didn't do very well for quite some time until they learned to vote for the right party. But if you say, it doesn't matter, you're Republican, you're Democrat, I love you both, I'll treat you both equally, well then, what incentive do you have to vote Democrat? So I'd only like to say that sane Biden versus the so-called, what do I say, the bad boy Trump. Americans, this is a land of the cowboy. It's a land of Western movies. It's a land of a lot of violence, if I may say so, in Hollywood, etc. And raw emotion seems to have worked, especially because you talk to many people in America and they'll say, Democrats, my God, no. They're all Antifa. They all want to bring Cuba into America. If you look at the Latinos, they've been told, and many of them believe it, that America will become Venezuela in 4 years of Joe Biden. It's incredible the way that message has got out. And I think if at all Donald Trump pulls off this upset victory, it will be a tribute, frankly, to the way emotion, imagery, and communication work in changing minds, even in the United States.
Thank you very much, Professor Nalapat. And this victory has, we are not going to claim victory, that this, if that happens, would have come on the back of a lot of hard work put in by individuals such as Sridhar Chityala ji. And I might tell you that there were a couple of videos that were blasted across the United States that really resonated, especially with the Indian Americans. Those of you who are thinking, how can a small community of 1.2 million voters, half of them don't even go to vote, make a difference? Just watch how the elections are now coming down to the wire in states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Florida and Texas, and so on and so forth. So Sridhar Chityala ji, please walk us through a little bit about the amount of work that you've been doing. When did you start working on this? How has your experience been? And perhaps our viewers will get to know that it is not so easy, especially in an election. I just want to preface one little thing. We had 102 million mailed in ballots, 102 million, and only 60 million voted. So that means that for the last 1 month, people have been sending in their choice, which means many of them did not even see this miracle of Trump getting COVID and then getting cured and then hitting the trail. So many have been making these decisions over a period of time. And despite all this, the fact that Trump is putting up such a spirited fight says something. And I would like you, Sridhar ji, to tell us, what do you think happened? How did Trump manage this feat?
Great. Well, I think that there is a preconceived rhetoric or believe that Republicans are racist and do not have a much wide representation of the community. That was proven wrong in the first phase, which is when President Trump won the elections in 2016. He brought a broad swathe of people, especially the blue-collar workers, into the mainstream, especially Republicans. Some of the Democratic blue-collar workers also switched and voted for Trump. So the campaign itself was orchestrated through what we call as coalitions. So there were coalitions established. Indian Voices for Trump is a coalition. Latino Voices for Trump is a coalition. So wide range of coalitions were established with leaders from those specific communities reaching out to these communities and telling them how Trump campaign and how Trump's policies impact and affect them. Especially many of them are small businesses. If I take a look at the economic policy of 2008 post-GFC, which I was very much integral as a banker, relative to what we saw in 2016, it's between daylight and darkness in terms of how the stimulus was orchestrated. The small businesses were one of the first segments targeted in terms of two things. One, supporting by way of wages, and two, preservation of the jobs. Those who avail the program must make sure that the jobs were protected till 2023 or 2025. So there was that kind of economic kind of stimulus backing the rhetoric, if one may have to say, which everybody attributes Trump to. So there was coalitions established to reach out the communities. The second thing that was done was door-to-door campaigns. So Republicans did door-to-door campaigns in terms of reaching out to the people. That's the reason why when people reached out and asked us the question, hey, the polls are saying 14%, 15%, 16%, 12%. Well, until about 100 million votes were counted on the popular vote, Trump was leading, contrary to the pollsters. So therefore, the bad habit of this left-wing liberalism and active kind of whatever you want to call incorrectness in the polls, became fairly apparent that the numbers were wrong. And in fact, yesterday Tucker Carlson went on the TV and basically mentioned, whether you're a liberal or a conservative, it doesn't matter, but we owe to the people what is called the right numbers. Then we can interpret either on a liberal or in this. So this whole pollster game in two successive polls, has proven to be wrong. So don't listen to the pollsters. So the campaigns that we did door to door, we extensively used social media campaigns. Now, one of the campaigns that I was part of, which we led, reached close to 50 million impressions. Now that's almost close to 1 to 2%, 1.5% of the addressable universe by way of sample in terms of reaching the audiences. Typically when you do research, you reach a very, very, very infinitely small sample of people. So we were able to get the message, notwithstanding the fact it is targeted at Indian American, but the message was resonating it's not restricted. Everybody else can kind of see the same message. And then we distill this message into what are the 6 things that are important for the voters and why you re-elect. So the social media campaigns, which is a platform, did resonate and did have an impact, and we can see that outcome. Florida was predicted to be a Republican. It turned out to be the opposite. When the results and analysis when the analysis finally comes out, you will see the broad constituents who voted for Trump happens to be from mainstream masses, not the perceived agenda of Trump being racist, elitist, white supremacist, all these kinds of adjectives that people use in terms of characterizing him. Then the other thing was what we call as an outreach. Wherever communities needed community type of programs, the Republican teams were present to do that. So all this resulted, and it's also backed by Al Mason's research. Al Mason has been stating, he has done an extensive research on Indian American community on the 12 battleground states. His research, which was consistently put down and denied, proved to be decisive and correct in terms of his assessment. If Indian Americans, for example, were preconceived Democrats, they're going to shift and vote because the reason is the policies that Trump has put in place is resonating. The messages are resonating. Now, to Professor Alapat's point in terms of Xi Jinping, well, in a democracy, Xi Jinping sent the coronavirus, but he also sent 60,000 soldiers to the Indian subcontinent. So what did United States do? United States sent its drones, its missiles, and it also sent its B-52 bomber nuclear arm. It's a fundamental difference between a Republican policy versus a Democratic policy. What did Obama do when Xi Jinping, imposed no-fly zones in Pacific? He sent B-52 bombers with unloaded, no missiles. And he told all the commercial planes basically to comply with the Chinese kind of policy. So all these kinds of messages began to resonate in terms of people saying, this man we did not put a traditional politician as a president. People like me supported Trump because he's non-traditional, right? He is rhetorical, right? Sometimes he's inconsistent, but his grasp of what needs to be done and execution. He's the only president who has not launched a war. He has struck peace deal between Israel and West Asia countries. I'm not using the word Middle East with respect to the previous speaker, said don't use Middle East. There's no Middle and East, so it's West Asia. So the West Asian peace agreement was done. The African peace agreement was done right in the middle of the crisis. He has defended Taiwan. So the story is that he opened the embassy in Israel. So he has executed on the promises, and that's what has made the difference in terms of the narrowness of the election, which was predicted to be a Biden walkover.
Thank you so much, Sridharji. Just two takeaways from what he just said. One is that United States has supplied B-52 bombers with nuclear warheads that are now sitting in India. That could be a very effective deterrent for China to do any kind of action. And notwithstanding the news article that appeared in Indian Express, I think that's bunkum. This is all people trying to put some news in there. The truth of the matter is now I expect China to withdraw with their tail tucked between their legs. Whether it happens or not, we'll have to wait and see. Another thing that he mentioned, high-speed drones are also available for India to use to monitor more effectively the line of actual control. And thirdly, Taiwan is very much in play. United States has gone full gung-ho support for them. So China is now getting hemmed in. To talk a little bit more about the security things, I'll come to Madhavdas Dalpati in just a minute. But before that, Mohandas Paiji, the markets have reacted. In fact, Nasdaq hit 5% stop, and I think they're slow. They're going manual now. So essentially, the market has baked in, I think, a Trump win, because if it was a Biden win, it would be a little bit less subdued than what I'm seeing. But how do you see the fact that the U.S. stock markets are celebrating the election, even though we don't know who the president is going to be, and what it means for the rest of the world?
Well, Sree, my personal view about the US stock market is that the market is moving because the rush of liquidity. Interest rates are all-time low. Like Sridhar says, the new monetary policy or the new monetary policy theory says that when the country has the power to print a currency and has low interest rates, they can print an unlimited amount and pump up the economy. And that's what the Federal Reserve is doing. They're not going to raise interest rates till 2022. They're pumping in money. The balance sheet is growing, and that money has to go somewhere. So there could be market corrections. So the market is waiting for a trigger. And if they believe that somebody like President Trump, who is business friendly, comes, they suddenly will go up. And that's what seems to happen. But just remember, I think yesterday or day before, the market was going up because they said Biden is going to come. So I think the key issue is the huge surge of liquidity that is in the markets, one. And two, Sree, if you look at all the stocks that are going up, they're all the digital stocks. I'm not seeing many Main Street companies going up. It's the digital stocks that are going up, and the digital stocks seem to have a disproportionate value in the indices, which are now going up. So it is a rush of money, and I think this market going up and down is also a function of the liquidity and the very, very low interest rate, and the possibility of the interest rates not going up for the foreseeable future, because the US too has many, many zombie companies. I think Sridhar can talk about the zombie companies which are earning money just possibly to pay interest or even less than that, and can never pay back the debt. So I think we are seeing increase in default in the bond market for junk bonds, and that's going up. Huge amounts of bonds being raised, some of them for AAA companies at very low rates. So what the market is doing is essentially responding to liquidity and every trigger. So I think that's my personal view. And whether it is for Trump or for Biden, I think it is a matter of how you look at it and what the issue is today. Maybe they want clarity on who is going to win, and they feel it doesn't matter. But see, what is important to understand is why did Silicon Valley back Biden so much and give him so much of money, despite knowing that the big digital companies are going to be hauled over the coals. They're going to look at the section in the Telecom Act or something which prevents them, which has given them protection to reduce that. They want to cut them down. The Democrats have got a report going. And Biden, if he comes back, is going to raise taxes for everybody. I never knew that Californians are so happy to pay 55, 60% tax. They must be wonderful people who want to pay more and more tax to a state which is giving them less and less and less, and where the politics has gone bonkers. So I don't know why they're pumping so much of money. So to me, all this is a mystery. And I think, but the big issue, Sree, which I would like clarity from Sridhar and possibly Professor Manalapat is, why are the American people accepting the rise of the extreme left? This Antifa movement, this extreme left, the destruction in the US, lack of respect for law and order, and all this, and many people, especially the Main Street Americans, now standing up in protest, asking for the rule of law. I mean, I'm shocked to see American society respond to riots in such a manner where they are saying that this violence seems to be okay. Even former President Trump made a speech where he was hinting that this violence by people is okay, is the way of showing the frustration. I saw a CNN anchor talking and saying, oh, the violence that hit the black man who was killed by the police, that's real violence. But burning officers, burning shops, burning and rioting and destroying property, that's not violence. That's a different kind of violence. This is violence. So I'm very intrigued at all the things that are happening here. But markets, I think, are going up because surge of liquidity and the digital growth.
Thank you, Mohandas Payore. One small request to you, Mohandas ji. Can you please try and set your microphone volume to max? You are coming in a little bit low. And while you do that, I would like both Nalapat ji and Sridhar ji to answer his specific question about the riots in the United States. And then we will go on with the main programming. First, Professor Nalapat.
Well, I think there is a simple answer, which is that essentially the media companies, the tech companies, the ones who are really the major shareholders, they are living very comfortably and very far away in gated communities where there's no question of any violence ever erupting. So living that kind of life, it's very important to feel that I have a great conscience. And what better way to show conscience than by saying, yes, somebody who goes into a shop, breaks a window, takes away a television set, that poor man deserves that particular television set. So personally, I think it's a way of solving the conscience. And, along with his recovery from COVID, frankly, and along with the fact that this man is a fighter, and the American people now know China is an adversary and they want a fighter, I think this violence also was a very good argument, if I may say so, for Sridhar and I mean to convince people. But I'd also want to say, the point about self-respect. Do you know, Sree, the only community that has voted for Donald Trump less than in 2016, almost every other community, whether it's Hispanics, Indian Americans, and African Americans, they've all voted. College-educated Americans have all voted more for Trump now than they did in the past. The white community in general, less of them have voted for Trump proportionately than voted in 2016. So this, as Sridhar was talking about racism, I mean, we're talking about so-called white racism. Well, this is the one community in all the demographic metrics that is actually Trump has slipped a little bit. And I'd like to say, howdy Modi, for example. Namaste Modi. Now, I mean, this is something in which an Indian Prime Minister and an American President were showcased, moving around as equals and moving around in an extremely convivial atmosphere. I think it was an acceptance by Trump of the importance of India in the anti-China coalition, which is people are trying to put together. And I'd like to say, whether it's Mike Pence, whether it's Pompeo, whether it's the National Security Advisor, whether it's the Defense Secretary, Esper, they know China. They understand China. And they know they got a fight on their hands. But, I mean, in Joe Biden's case, apart from, he put the enemy as Donald Trump, and then, and hope that enough people will hate Donald Trump. Personally, I would say he may have been right, but till the COVID came and Trump recovered and started moving around like a young man, I think it is difficult to hate a man after that. Frankly, I'll tell you, I got some people who are very negative to Trump watching some of his speeches. It's very difficult to hate a man like that. You may disagree violently with him, but hating him is very tough.
Thank you, Nalapatji.
Sree, I just want to ask Monu, since he's here. Monu, what do you think is the role of the American media? I mean, I find them to be so much anti-Trump. They lie through their teeth. They run fake narratives. We're used to some of the media in India running fake narratives deliberately. We're seeing so much of this in America. How is media going to be trusted ever in the United States after this, what they did during this campaign?
Well, Mohan, I'd like to point out, why is the foreign media, for example, so much against Prime Minister Modi? Especially Western media, where European media, American media. During the previous UPA administration, they had an open sesame to all the ministers, and they had an open. The top people had an open door to the fountain of power, which was 10 Janpath, and Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi. Even NGOs, frankly, Western NGOs were all welcome. Now, in the age of Modi, unless you speak Hindi or Gujarati or Telugu or something, the question that they'll ask is, okay, you've got the New York Times. How many votes will I get from readers of the New York Times, as compared to, let's say, readers of Enado or readers of a language paper, another language paper or an English language paper in India. So the point is access. The Trump administration, frankly, Trump has given a lot of access in that sense in terms of press conferences. But I'd like to say, someone who has been at least, if I may say so, tangentially connected with journalism for quite some time, what journalists prize is the inside access. That a politician and a journalist get together, spend 3-4 hours together, and essentially discuss the nuts and bolts of policy, the nuts and bolts of what's happening in the world, nuts and bolts of what's happening in politics, and build up those warm relationships. Trump has got those warm relationships with Fox News and with Tucker Carlson, maybe, and with a few other people, but he doesn't have it with the so-called liberal media. And of course, you can't, because you have a limited amount of time. You can't spend all your time cultivating the media. But I'd like to say, one answer to that is access. And during the Obama administration, for example, whether it was a president or vice president or cabinet people, you could always have a private lunch and dinner and discuss things. I don't think the Trump team, frankly, has much space for a private lunch or a private dinner with the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, and all these media organizations that are also attacking Modi, because unfortunately for them, the government here does not have at all as much time for them as compared to the lavish amount of attention showered on them during the UPA.
Thank you. 1 second, Mohandas Payare. Let me get to Sridharji, give him a chance on the violence in America. Then we'll resume our main programming, because I have some more questions that I'd like to ask the whole panel. Sridharji, please go ahead.
Well, I think the violence in America is a very, very recent phenomenon. you have had racial riots, which is caused by some issues. You have had disagreements. You have had incidents that trigger. But what we saw during the last 6-8 months, it raises the question, which is, I'm saying this contextually. There was a huge spurt in violence which triggered off from Seattle, made all its way back to California, then flashed up and flared up because of George Floyd incident in Minnesota. And then it spread to it came to New York, then it was in Massachusetts. And then all of a sudden, a movement started called BLM. And that began to spread through activism around the world. And suddenly, 3 months, 2 months prior to the elections, everything died. Everything died. Probably some internal polls which indicate this is having adversarial impact on the polling. There is no other logical reason one can give as to why all of a sudden it died. And this whole concept of defund police is another moment that spurred up. All is a reminiscent aspects of what you see in socialist and communist regimes. And what is the cost? There's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of data that is floating around which says, money came in, activism. George Soros even went to World Economic Forum and made a public statement. He hates certain type of people that includes Trump, Modi, Xi Jinping, Bolsonaro, etc. And he's going to help the so-called educate the people on the new model. There's a theory, there's a fair amount of money that went in, even in the United States. Otherwise, these things don't get triggered. So the violence seems to be orchestrated. The reasons are still not quantified and publicly displayed, as much as the reasons why it died down all of a sudden prior to 2 months prior to the elections. That would be my my response to that question.
Thank you, Sridhar ji. Let's go back to the main topics that we were discussing. The next question is to Professor Nalapar. Professor Nalapar, given the fact that about 105 fighter planes and B-52 bomber with a nuclear warhead equipped on it are perhaps parked somewhere very close to the LAC, how do you see the equations with China change? Also with Pakistan, because these two Pakistan has been saber-rattling, fulminating for a long time. How do you see these relationships evolve over the next few months? Because this doesn't matter who's going to be the president. This is going to be there. This is the new normal in terms of relationship between India and America. How do you see it moving forward, sir?
Well, I'd like to say that the next year is the 100th anniversary year of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. And Xi Jinping needs a victory in that way. Basically, what is a victory? A victory is to get the humiliation of a rival in some theater. Now, Taiwan, for example, I don't believe that that Xi Jinping is in any position to invade Taiwan and occupy Taiwan. The Taiwan Straits and Taiwanese defenses, especially in the last 3 or 4 years of the Trump administration. I mean, the Dr. Tsai and Donald Trump administration have worked very closely together, and today Taiwan is much better defended than it was 4 years ago. But they may try and grab some small island and humiliate the Taiwanese government. In my view, it is absolutely well within the realm of probability that the Chinese may make an entry into some part of India, either in the Sikkim side, Arunachal, Ladakh, most likely Ladakh and Arunachal, grab some territory very publicly, hold on to a territory in an effort to, in a sense, what they call humiliate India. So this kind of thing is very likely, frankly, to happen. So I would not really believe that peace has suddenly broken out in our time. If you remember, there have been historical periods where people have proclaimed peace has broken out. And even in India, multiple times regarding Pakistan, we have seen peace has broken out. I think the Chinese realize that India and the United States together are a formidable team, and that and that India's will has got to be broken, and they will therefore look for some kind of a humiliation. But I do believe we can confront it and fight it. We could have done it on our own, but I can tell you, together with the United States, it's absolutely certain that we can not only confront it, but we can humiliate somebody else. And you know what I'm talking about. And I agree with you, Frank. I mean, I don't know, frankly, what weapons have been given or what weapons have not been given. I do know that a lot of the Indian establishment, especially the military, has been used to the Russians for 60 and odd years. But today, their thinking of Americans is now very positive. Why? Because you've seen the Chinook helicopters, how effective they are. You've seen the American lift aircraft, C-130s, etc. You've seen some of the smart weapons that Americans have got. You've seen Apache helicopters. You know that in Kargil, for example, if you had Apaches, you would have driven them out in half the time it took, and with the fear of the community, because you have radar that can look through mountains and direction, the fire. So all this is an invaluable gift. India is also an important gift. Because I can tell you, unless your Lockheed and McDonnell Douglas and Raytheon and all these companies relocate part of their production to India, whatever Trump may say about building in America, it cannot mean building only in America, because if you build only in America, the Sino-Russian alliance will ensure that their products outprice you in a lot of markets. A lot of markets. And I just want to make a final point to Sridhar. Look, Donald Trump has been a great supporter of the fight against corruption. He stood by Saudi Arabia's crown prince against corruption. I'm still wondering why on earth he's supporting Erdogan. Erdogan is a complete Wahhabi. And I'm still wondering why he has given a free pass to Turkey from S-400. Because after Turkey, it's going to be India, it's likely to be Qatar, the UAE. So I'd only like to say that there are some aspects of the Trump policy which some of us are a little worried about.
Thank you very much, Professor Nalapat. Mohandas Pai Aure, I'm getting some feedback, extra noise on your side. Can you check and see if there's any other sounds around you, sir? But here is what I'm thinking. Yeah. Now the sound is fine. Your voice is great now. Your voice is great now. Yeah. Wonderful. But there is some other voice, some lady voice coming in the background. I don't know where. If one of you could check and see if you can take care of that. We are down to our last question. This is a very important question. I will give a chance 4 minutes to each one of you to answer that, and then one final round of observations, a summarization from each one of you. So 6 minutes each. Please plan for that. It will give us about an hour's worth of programming. I'm going to start with Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, China has a huge financial problem, a financial systems problem. How do you see this moving forward? I'm talking about the renminbi, I'm talking about the Hong Kong dollar, and the Hong Kong dollars being coupled with the United States dollars. Now, you mentioned in the past that close to 98% of Wall Street was backing Biden because they felt that their investments through the Hong Kong route to China was at risk. With, let us say, Trump coming back, how do you see this thing play out? What do you think China is going to do? They've tried everything under the sun, including a digital RMB. What do you think they're going to try and do on the financial front, sir?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I think just let me, the responsiblepolitics.org states that 98% of the billionaires' contributions went to Biden. One of the questions, one of the themes that is presented, I think there's something going on, television going on, not getting the voice. You have to mute, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute. I'm trying to mute. 1 second. Just give me a second. Now, can you go ahead?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's both Wall Street as well as the tech street, right? Both sides of the fence have significantly contributed. Now, in terms of your specific question, there's a belief that there is a significant amount of business transacted between the Silicon Valley companies and especially Huawei. The banning of Huawei has had some kind of impact on the flow on businesses between the valley and the ecosystem that constitutes Huawei. That's one of the theories that is being, exact number of dollars is not quantified. So there's a belief that Biden would be sympathetic on the techno cooperation between the valley and the China, notwithstanding the fact many tech companies were denied access. So that's one theme that's playing out, which is the reason why the money flow went in. Okay, for example, the flow of money, especially into Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, close to $140 million was spent to unseat just those two people, right? It's a reflection because those two guys sit on key committees in the Senate to unseat them, and of course, Mitch McConnell is the leader of the Senate. On the renminbi question and the fundamental underlying issues of exposure of China is, whatever one may say, is I'm reminded of the same theory that was floated around Japan in going back to 70s and 80s and early 90s, 80s and 90s when I used to work in Asia. The same thing. China is strong. It doesn't matter what the underlying issues are. It's a net exporter. There is a need for renminbi. They will keep either renminbi low, they will work around it, or they may do other measures by which they will say you have to only trade in renminbi if you have to work with me rather than reserve currencies. So all these issues around corruption and fundamental kind of stability issues around renminbi and the underlying exposure of what you call badly performing assets and so on, I think China will deal with it in its own manner. It will not follow the conventional democratic and market principles. It will follow what it calls, just like Ant Financial. IPO was launched and they suspended, notwithstanding it was to be the largest single IPO and big market capitalization, right? Suspended. So they have the ability to unilaterally act and deal with issues. China is here to stay, and every country in the world must know how to deal with it and how to live with it. And no point in trying to use yardsticks that we traditionally apply in democratic markets.
Thank you, Sridharji. Mohandas Pai Aure, I have muted you. You have to please unmute yourself. Now you can answer, sir. And then just the same question, China's financial problem.
Well, my view is, if you look at China's financial problems, Sree, there are two problems that people say China has. The first problem is that there are a lot of NPAs in the local market, and China is sitting on a time bomb. I've been hearing the same for the last 10 years. But people forget a very, very substantial part of the bank loans are internal yuan loans, their local currency. China can easily take over 25, 30, 40% of GDP as loans from all these banks and clean the pump. And China did it once before. It's a state-directed economy. The second issue is China has lent about $1 trillion outside China to various countries like Africa and other emerging markets. And because the Belt and Road program, they're facing difficulty. But, they can afford to wait for a long period of time. And they can suck these countries dry by taking away the raw material, because China is a large consumer of raw material that these countries export. So, this whole story about China's financial problems, etc., I don't know how far it is valid, because a country can have a financial problem provided it's got large overseas debt. Now, China has got a net surplus. It's still got a net surplus in exports with the rest of the world, and that's going to remain for a long period of time, even if supply chains shift. China is trying to pump up local consumption to make sure that when exports come down, they'll be able to survive and grow. So I don't know how much credence is there. China has got a plan to increase local consumption, reduce the share of investment in GDP, which is currently 45-50%, should come down to 30%. Consumption should go up to 70%. Is a long-term strategy that they have. And I believe that they will pull it off, having seen the economy for the last 10-15 years, when everybody spoke about fudge numbers, about the financial system breaking down, blah, blah, blah. We must remember the Chinese people have a savings rate of 45% of GDP. 45% of GDP. That's enormously high. People have been telling us that real estate is a large factor in savings. True. Real estate is a large factor behind the Chinese growth. Very true. There are many, many cities which have been built up, which are vacant. Very true. But the Chinese government has the ability to take over the debt and clean it up because they're largely internal debt. And as far as digital money is concerned for China, yes, I keep reading about it. But the question of what is the world's reserve currency boils down to one simple thing. Sree, which currency will you trust if you want to keep your savings? Are you going to trust the yuan? You're going to have it in yen? You're going to have it in euro or the dollar? The world overwhelmingly wants to have a reserve currency in dollars. And that, I think, is not going to go away whatever China does. China's hegemony in the South China Sea, saber rattling in the Himalayas, saber rattling in with Russia, saber rattling with Japan, is not getting them a lot of friends. And even the friends that they have who take the money, like Pakistan, are going to face internal resistance because of what they're doing to their own people in the part of their territory. So I think we have to wait and see. These are all, done very, very prematurely. So my view is that we're not going to see a financial crisis for the next 5-7 years, and China will manage to grow out of it.
Thank you very much, Mohandas Pai Aure. I have one input to offer, but I'll refer on that. But I want to hear Professor Nalapat. You have traveled extensively in China and around China for many, many years. You are a China watcher. What do you feel? How do you feel China is going to come out of this financial hole? Before you start answering, sir, I just want to mention one little fact. This is a fact because what people say is that China is printing RMB about 3 times its GDP value every year, whereas most countries will do only a fraction of their GDP in terms of printing new notes. This is the allegation that is laid at China's door. And keeping that in mind, please give us your response on this, sir.
Well, I'd like to say that I agree with Sridhar and Mohandas. The fact is that the Communist Party of China is the sole owner of everything in China, whether it is Jack Ma's company or anything else. Anything that operates in China, they are the sole owners of that, number one. Number two, under the Xi Jinping doctrine, any Chinese, Han Chinese, anywhere in the world, you could be in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Thailand, in some other parts of the world. I'm not going to name them, but there are many other parts of the world. If you are Chinese, then you have to serve the interests of the country that is ensuring that the Han people are going to displace the people of European descent as the most important people in the world. And China has very open about something that I've been writing for quite some time, and the Chinese were the most vehement in denying it, that the Chinese want to be the top player on the world stage. The fact is, I have long had this theory that China is wanting a reset of the US dollar. And one of the triggers in which I further reinforce this is the Belt and Road Initiative. Why are these projects denominated in dollars? The Chinese love their RMB. Why can't you denominate in RMB? Then the answer is very clear, at least to me, that look, you are denominating in dollars. You have huge dollar debts that have been created in companies. You're spending your dollars on these projects. And then when the countries cannot pay the dollars, you get hold of tangible, geopolitically important, commercially important assets. Today, the Chinese have got assets, at least 2 EU countries, I'm not going to name them, are virtually prisoners of China. If the EU goes into a very negative thing on China, and given the unanimity situation in the EU, well, then, these 2 countries are not going to agree to that. ASEAN, you have 2 ASEAN countries that are essentially, running to the Chinese drum. So the fact is that they are looking for a reset of the dollar because they know exactly what Mohandas was saying. The strength of America is in large part because dollar is the reserve currency. And whether it's a question of sale of oil from Venezuela or from Iran or tomorrow gladly from Saudi Arabia, any part of the world, they will do it in renminbi. They want to break the petrodollar link, and they want to make one way in which the Americans have also helped them is this weaponization of the dollar. You have weaponized the dollar against Iran, for example, the Trump administration, the Obama administration, various administrations have done that, with the result that many people are now saying, okay, I've got a lot of, money in US dollars. I mean, and let's be, the sad truth is a lot of that money may be kept in all kinds of overseas destinations. But tomorrow, if the FBI decides that I've been in touch with some people here or there and I'm supposed to be a target, the Americans can then freeze all the dollars I have. Libya, they froze. Iran, they froze. So this whole question of weaponization of the dollar, freezing dollar assets, not only of individuals, which is valid, but of entire countries, in my view, is harmful. Just as, for example, a demonetization of currency will also affect the confidence of people in the currency. The American dollar is the most counterfeited currency in the world. The Americans have wisely not ever demonetized the dollar. And the reality of the situation is, whether it is digitalization, whether it is blockchain technology, which is transparent, whether it is buying of gold in immense quantities, and the Chinese are buying gold from the Americans, they're buying gold from the Europeans, they're buying gold from wherever they can find it, they're keeping that gold, and they don't allow any export of gold. I think they're preparing for an era in which the dollar is knocked down by 30 or 40%. And then people are going to say, what is the other currency? And I know that it may sound a little fanciful at this point in time, but they're hoping that more and more people are going to say, at least among the basket of 2 or 3 good currencies, let the renminbi also be there. And the dollar, the Chinese are targeting the Americans. And I would like only to say, I'm not sure the Biden camp has got it. I would still like to believe, based on my assessment of the situation, that I think Biden has still got a very good chance of becoming president of the United States. So far as India is concerned, so far as Israel is concerned, I would like to say Donald Trump will be far better for India than Joe Biden. There's no doubt about that. Far better. And especially if he retains Pompeo, Esper, O'Brien, and relies on Mike Pence. I hope he doesn't change them. If he keeps them, he'll be far better for India. Because the reality of the situation is, Sree, the Chinese have been at war with you guys for a long time. To Chinese, war is not bang, bang, and artillery and bombing and, whatever it's called, Top Gun or whatever it's called. War is domination over your mind. War is making you do what they want you to do. And they have what is called the Jimmy philosophy. And the Jimmy philosophy is, you have people who in protocol terms you treat as equals, who have palaces and protocol and respect and guards of honor inside and outside their country, and are shown great honor in Beijing when they come. But essentially, they will do what the Chinese want them to do. That is the system they are now slowly building up through Belt and Road and through various other initiatives. And this is a war for them. And finally, I think it is the Trump administration that understands America also is at war with China.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Lastly,
go ahead.
Without India on America's side, America is not going to win this war in the Indo-Pacific. And therefore, and India, I think we have also come to realize, without America on our side, we are going to be in deep trouble with this country that is systematically and ruthlessly trying to reach the top.
Thank you very much, Professor Nalapat. I just want to give every one of you 2 minutes to summarize and give your vision for how things are going to happen in the next 12 months. And I'd like us to come back again in about maybe 3 months' time when the dust has settled to go over this and revisit it. Because viewers, I can guarantee you, you are not going to get the kind of breadth of coverage that you have seen in this 1 hour of investment of your time that has happened with PGurus. I'm greatly indebted to each and every one of you gentlemen. So let's start with Sridhar Chityalaji. Please give us your vision for the next 12 months, sir.
Great. So let me start with the topic that I didn't touch, which is media, which was discussed. So in the next 12 months, the media is going to become even more volatile as they see more and more dissent against their narrative. And in my view, today, the difference between today and let's say 20 years ago or 25 years ago is 25 years ago, we had Madison Avenue. We don't have a Madison Avenue today. That's a complete disruption that has taken place. So more and more global collaboration of these left alliances, you can see. It's Reuters, Washington Post, Bloomberg, New York Times. The narrative is exactly the same, or the narrative is often kind of quoted from these specific sources. BBC, I forgot, BBC, you add BBC to it. So that there are more and more collaboration on the media side, and less truth is going to come out. My wife asked me the question, is there anything in between left and right? No, there's nothing in between. Either you go this way or you go that way. That's my first kind of prediction. We can come back. The second one is the 0% interest rate regime will continue. And in fact, I feel Europe may go into negative rates basically because there is unless they have more and more liquidity in the system, there's no way by which you can have a nuclear force to lift their demand side of the ledger, right? So I see more and more, continued sustained stimulus in 0%. So therefore, that's the second much more, I don't know whether I use the word integrated economic policies. Most of the central institutions like IMF and World Bank and central governors would say, hey, we need to have a coordinated kind of policy. There's never yes, because the economies are asymmetric. At least you got to have liquidity supply and consistent interest rates, so there's no question of any arbitrage. The third that I would summarize, the third thing that I would say is it's going to take another 12 months before this vaccine is found, socialized, and some kind of mechanism established how to deal with it. By the way, we still are solving the H1N1 virus, which we had 70 million people impacted in the United States. Nobody wants to talk about it, right? And as we say to my friend Joe Biden, hey, 200,000 people died, but we saved 98% of the people. We didn't kill 98%. So similarly, I think we'll kind of live with the virus. The countries will adapt to exist. You cannot shut economies. You cannot keep people inside homes. You got to get them out. This is, by the way, the doctors' views as well. You got to kind of live and have the body develop the immune system. So I see eventual realization. You wear masks, you do whatever you want to do, but you kind of, work with the society and move forward. And my final point is that this is to my dear friend Mohan, is that technology is endemic in United States ecosystem. It's endemic. It has connected the value chain between the consumer and the supplier. And the connectivity between the supplier and the producer is not at the same rate. When that happens between producer, supplier, and consumer, you will see much more acceleration of an integrated growth in the economic system. Right now, it is between the supplier and the consumer. Doesn't matter which segment of the industry, right? That is why we had seen in 2020 such huge spurt in sales. Doesn't matter whether it is consumer discretionary or whether it is consumer staple. The propulsion and spend came through the digitization models, including the consumption of education and all of the remote working, etc., etc. That is why you have seen these digital companies play this disruptive and transformative role in the evolution of change that has kind of taken place. They are not just merely digital. They're digital, but they're digital in terms of the change in the consumptive behavior that has driven by necessity. Usually we do marketing programs to change behavior. Here, by necessity, we have changed the behavior. So to me, more and more propane gas under these technology companies to be influencers in the consumptive patterns. So that's what, in my view, is driving the next top 4 priorities for the next 12 months in terms of what we are going to see around the world.
Thank you so much, Sridhar Chityalaji. Mohandas Pai Avre, please unmute yourself. And in the context of India, United States, and China being the 3 key drivers in the next 12 months, how do you see your vision, sir? 2 minutes.
Well, I think the world will be politically volatile for the next 12 months. And political volatility is going to increase because China has to reaffirm its status in the world when there is a greater opposition to its hegemony, like Professor Nalapal said, 100 years of the Communist Party, they have to do something. Xi Jinping has solidified his role as the next great helpsman after Chairman Mao. So we're going to see something happening there. 2, very importantly, in the Middle East, we're going to see the Islamic axis try to break the Saudi-dominated OIC. Erdogan, Mahathir, and Pakistan coming together is not going to be taken easily by the Arabs. The Arabs have not forgotten the Ottoman domination of their countries going back 600 years and what they have done to the Arabs. I think that is something in the Middle East that's going to come, and that will be linked with the increase in Islamist violence and terrorism all across Europe, because we're going to see Europe stand up to it, led by Macron and possibly Germany. And, Johnson or his successors are going to be there to do that. So political volatility is going to be very, very high in the next 12 months till things settle down, because this is an inflection point. Second, I think the world economy will be negative for next year too. This year is ending in December. It's going to be a negative year. IMF said 4% or 5%. I think it'll be 6 to 8% because UK has gone into shutdown. Europe is gone into shutdown. America, we're going to see because of the delayed election results until something comes. I don't know whether the stimulus will come, what is going to happen. And China is growing. Japan is still behind. India will be coming up. But I think the world is going to be negative. And next year too, I don't see great prospects of growth for Europe coming up because the lingering effect of all this will be felt. And China, of course, will possibly grow. India will grow. I'm confident that US may move sideways, may grow 1 or 2%, because I think the large part of the service economy has to readjust. The digital economy, like Sridhar said, has to readjust. The third thing is there are going to be asset bubbles. Asset bubbles because a whole lot of money that's been printed in Europe and in the United States has to find a way out after the elections get over. Because the only way they'll go out is to go globally and try to buy assets. We're seeing already in emerging markets, they're trying to buy up some debt, they're trying to buy up real estate, etc. And the asset bubble is not going to go away because the tremendous amount of great liquidity happening. And the last point which I would like to make is that there is going to be a realignment of global forces with Russia, because I think Putin is watching on the sidelines what to do. Putin has got the Middle East covered. Even if Biden and Trump come, they're not going to be in the Middle East. And if President Trump comes, he's trying to get the Arabs to make peace with Israel. And I think Putin is going to be the zinger, because next 1 year, if Putin doesn't make his move, China becomes a bigger player, and the world gets divided between China and the United States-led Quad or whatever it is against China politically to stop Chinese hegemony, then Russia will be left out. So I think the jigsaw puzzle about that too has to come. So my view is political volatility, economic growth will be less for the entire world. Next year will be negative. Liquidity boom will be there. It will be asset bubbles in many parts of the world, and the beginning of a possibly new alignments coming up, and Russia has to make a move.
Thank you so much, Mohandas Pai Avre. Professor Nalapat, your closing comments, sir.
Well, I only want to say that, one of the points I think in which Donald Trump has scored is his absolute clarity about the fact that you can't shut an economy or a country or society down because of this particular virus. The reality situation is, Sree, any of us could get this virus. Any of us could, let's be honest, die of this virus. But the reality of this is that we have to live with it. We have to learn to live with it. And that is where I have, from day one, I have been talking against this effort at talking about flattening the curve, X, Y, Z, whatever, and talking in terms of finding therapeutics. And Donald Trump is a walking ad for therapeutics in dealing with COVID-19. So the reality situation is that that pragmatic approach is important. In India, for example, we have had a very stringent lockdown. Let me tell you, the Chinese never had that kind of lockdown. I have calculated that the population of China that was into lockdown is roughly 190 million, of which 110 million were in rural areas. And the lockdown in rural areas was to prevent urban people from coming there and infecting the rural people, not the other way around. So they never had a lockdown, frankly, and today they're completely out of it. 190 million against 1.3 billion Indians who are in lockdown, and possibly, about 200 million Americans who have been put in lockdown. So I'd only like to say, Sree, the Chinese, I'm not saying that. Two or three things I'd like to say. One, I'm not saying the Chinese are responsible for this. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe that they are having conspiracies or whatever, but luck has favored them. And one piece of good luck is that COVID is spread all across the world. That's really good luck for them. That is not only in China, it is spread all across the world. And the second point is WHO recommend, and the Bill Gates Institute, that University of Washington, whatever, the London, Johns Hopkins, the London Imperial College, they all wanted the strictest possible lockdown. And so many governments went ahead with this strictest possible lockdown. And I can tell you, I have been asking the Indian government to spend 5% of GDP over 3 years. That's 15%, which I think is the minimum needed for growth. I applaud the Americans, I applaud the British, some of the EU powers for spending to keep jobs going. But what we need to do is the same thing in India. But we're not doing that, right? I'd like to end by saying why I'm optimistic is the same disruptor, digital. In India, it is very easy to be corrupt because so many transactions and processes are non-transparent. When they go digital, they become more transparent. When a blockchain, for example, will be the future of the Indian or the world banking system. The Chinese are pioneers in that. They recognize that. They fought cryptocurrency, they fought blockchain, and we are still fighting it. But the fact is, when you're talking about central banks, let me be frank, in the currencies of the future, the digital currencies of the future, central banks will be way less powerful than what they are now. You are going to see a decentralization of power and authority in the digital era. You're going to see increased transparency in administrative processes. And in India, I can tell you, where we are so used to this colonial government and so used to colonial practices and government controlling everything, I think it will be a welcome relief to have, as Prime Minister Modi says, minimum government and maximum governance.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I got to hear so many different views and such richness in content, such food for thought for the brain. And I hope to see you all back soon with us, maybe about 2 to 3 months' time when the dust settles. Whenever that happens, I'd like to have you back, because then we can start giving it a little bit more clarity and structure to what we discussed today. Thanks once again, and we'll be back. Thank you, viewers. Today was one of the all-time high viewership that we had, and we hope to replicate this in future. We hope you enjoyed our program, and please, if you have not subscribed to our channel, do so. Thank you very much, and namaskaram.
Namaskar, and thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure.